Very good morning. On behalf of International Center, let me welcome our eminent speakers and participants for this interactive session, which is part of the series of programs on good governance initiated by International Center Goa. Before we start with this informal interactive session, let me invite our eminent speakers. Dr. Dilip Padgaonkar, an eminent journalist and former executive managing editor and the current consulting editor of Times of India. Mr. Vinod Dua, presently associated with NDTV and an eminent anchor, political commentator, election analyst, producer and director. And Ms. Vinita Deshmukh, who has a long experience of about 2 decades with Indian Express, and she also launched in 2006 Intelligent Pune, a weekly tabloid, and also co-authored a book on a book titled To the Last Bullet, and she co-authored it with Mrs. Vinita Kamte, wife of Mumbai Additional Commissioner of Police Ashok Kamte, who died in the Mumbai terror attack. This session in particular is organized especially for students of journalism and mass communication and journalists. In the afternoon, all the 3 speakers are going to have a panel discussion on the role of media in good governance. So I would like to hand over it to the panel.
Good morning, students and friends. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you today for this 3rd session that we're doing on good governance, and we've got a very eminent panel, as has been told to you. We have not structured anything today for the morning session. There are no speeches that are going to be given by any of our panelists. We were looking at it more as an interactive session, but to start the ball rolling, I'll ask Mr. Dilip Padgaonkar to say a few words, and then let the panelists say 5 minutes something what they want to say, and then all of you can react to that or ask your questions or whatever, but be very brief and very to the point.
Morning, everybody. No, I don't intend to make a speech even for 5 minutes. What I do intend doing, however, is to ask 2 or 3 questions. And on the basis of those questions, maybe we can develop the interactive session. Let me quickly get a sense of the house. All of you are students of journalism and mass media. How many of you are happy with the way Indian media functions? Those who think they are happy with the way things are, put up your hands. Okay. Those who think that the Indian media are not functioning the way they should, please put up your hands. Okay, my next question. How many of you have read this morning's newspapers? How many of you have seen news on television this morning? How many of you have gone to the internet to look at the news? Okay. That also tells you something about the interactive session. My last question is, I believe that many of you are first-year students, but then there's a mix, I'm told. Could someone very quickly tell me what should be the main quality of a journalist? I'll list 4 things. You just tell me whether you agree with it. Skills in writing. How many agree? Skills in writing. Okay. My second question. Curiosity. Okay. Skepticism about all authority. to be skeptical of all authority. How many agree? Okay. I'm sorry? You know, to be skeptical, to be critical of everything that you hear from authoritative sources. The job of a journalist is to be skeptical. You have to test information you get from any official source with another source in order to ensure that what you put out for your viewers or your readers is credible. Okay, good. No more questions, but I think we've got a fairly good idea. Then I'm going to tell you an anecdote which I've narrated in this very room when I was last here. You know, I was sent by the Times of India. My first job in the Times of India was as a foreign correspondent. I was based in Paris, and I covered developments in Europe for the Times of India. Now, in August 1968, Soviet troops, Soviet Union was still around, invaded a small country called Czechoslovakia and occupied that country. In February of the following year, my editor asked me to visit Czechoslovakia and report on what life was under Soviet occupation. And it was a bit of a hazardous task because I was constantly followed by plainclothes people. It's a totalitarian communist government. And there was a young student from the university who helped me translate because I knew neither Czech nor Slovak, so I had to rely on someone, and I relied on this student. So while having coffee once, I said to him, I said, look, tell me, what are newspapers like in your country? So he said, well, sir, our newspapers contain truths, half-truths and lies. The truths are in the sports pages. The half-truths are in the weather columns, and the lies everywhere else. Because it was a censored press. Many years later, I go back to Prague, and this time the communist regime is gone. It's replaced by a democratic government. Socialism is out. Capitalism is in. And I narrate this story to a professor of the university, and I said, well, professor, what are newspapers like in your country today? And he said, well, they still contain truths, half-truths and lies. But since everything is sponsored, you can't tell the difference. So this is in reply to one of the questions that's been raised, that what has been happening is that there has been, because of the market conditions under which media function, there has been a far closer nexus, if that's the word, between the advertising world and the media. There was a time about 20 years ago when media houses, certainly newspaper houses, earned around 50 to 55% of their revenues from what is called the cover price, which means the amount of money you pay to buy a newspaper. And the rest came from advertising. Today, close to 90% comes from advertising, and just about 10% comes from the cover price. To give you one example, a national newspaper, the largest in the country, it costs 7 rupees to print one copy. It is sold for 2 rupees 50. Where does the difference come from? The difference comes from advertising. And therefore there is this great dependence. The dependence is even greater for television, because there everything goes on TRPs. And the extent to which that has an impact on the content of news is something that I think we need to know. It's not as if it's a completely black picture. There are shades of gray. There are still excellent newspapers and excellent television channels, and of course excellent anchors, one seated right next to me, who has been able to not care a tuppence about what the corporate world thinks. But the fact is that when you go into the media, you've got to see the degree of dependence on certain sources. In earlier times, you depended on the government. because the government that gave you land at cheap prices, allowed you to import newsprint at lower subsidized rates and so on, things have changed. So in this interactive session, I would rather focus on the future than really on the past, because contrary to a lot of people, and judging by the kind of responses I got from you, my feeling is that not too many of you are aware of the absolutely fantastic opportunities that await young journalists today. And these opportunities are happening primarily because levels of education have risen, because there's been a much greater awareness, there is a greater degree of plurality in the media. Indian economy doing well means that, as a rule, media are also going to do pretty well despite problems here and there. But above all, I think Indian democracy is making every citizen today ask questions. And I think this is something which we all should be very proud of, that the ability to ask tough questions is at the heart of any new undertaking that one does. And that can be in any domain. You can be a restaurant critic, or you can be a tennis commentator, or you could be a political writer. But as I keep on saying, unless you ask the tough questions, use available instruments to get the right answers. And later in the day, this afternoon, we'll spend a lot of time discussing the RTI, which is a very lethal weapon if it is well used and well understood. But I still believe that there were some of you who raised your hands when I asked what do you think are the most important things for journalists. And I'm delighted to find that there were at least a dozen hands which said it was curiosity. I think what leads our profession, whether you are beginning in the profession or you're at the end of your career, is this ability to be curious. The more curious you are, and curiosity comes in various ways. You've been taught right in the beginning that you learn to ask 5 questions: who, why, what, when, how, etc. But there are things beyond that, because the world is changing so rapidly that unless we keep abreast of what's happening, and media themselves, because of technology, is offering absolutely extraordinary opportunities, because we are quickly moving in from a mass product to a customized product. And it's on your cell phone more and more that you're going to receive the kind of information that you want, and for which you need, therefore, specialized training, specialized instruction, and even your curiosity has to be quite sharply focused. And all of this, I think, is going to mean that journalism is going to be a changed profession, but it's also going to be a very exciting profession to be in. The glamour bit will always be there, and I think many of you are in it for the glamour as well, and I have nothing against it. But at the heart of the enterprise is curiosity and hard work and asking questions and to be fearless. And if you see the kind of newspaper, I don't want to be critical, but if you see this morning's papers which I've read, the one thing truly lacking is the quality of curiosity. Merely to say so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that doesn't take you so far. And this happens very often also on the news in the evenings, where Prime Minister said this and opposition leader said that, and then you get party spokesmen each shouting at each other, and you're really not getting forward. So this is what's happening. Things are changing, and I think they will change for the better if students like you understand the basic, and the basic thing is just ask questions. The tougher the questions, the better. And I hope that that's what you're going to do in the next 1 hour. Thank you.
You are students of mass communication in terms of television. Okay, I'm afraid I have never been involved with the print media, so I'm not in a position to speak anything about print, but this is my 37th year in television. I'll tell you about the evolution of television news in this country, and where we are now, and the concerns expressed by Dilip when there are considerations of the market, TRPs, how does it affect our content, our editorial content, all right? I am reminded of an eminent television critic who's no more, Mr. Iqbal Masood, He once said that democracy is an imperfect institution. So is free media. But I would rather prefer an imperfect democracy to a perfect dictatorship, and an imperfect free media to a gagged so-called responsible media. So here we are. We have a media which is very vibrant, full of youngsters, warts and all. That's Dilip's favorite expression. We have a media which is vibrant, and this country is pulsating with expectations, because there has been a generational change within our generation only. And media has also changed. But today what we see is, when we look at the editorial content of Hindi news channels particularly, what really saddens me is that many of the Hindi news channels have moved away from news to low-cost entertainment reality. प्रिंस गड्ढे में गिर गया, इच्छाधारी नागिन, स्वर्ग की सीढ़ियां, भूत. Now these are not news items. Once Prince, a little boy, falls into a ditch, that's news. But if you stay on that, you're making it into an event. And if you go on and on reporting that, it becomes low-cost entertainment reality television. Now, we have had magazines like Manohar Kahaniyan and Satya Kathaएं, etc. also. Very popular magazines, people read them, they sell very well. But they never call themselves news magazines. Similarly, if you look at the content of these television channels, the Hindi news channels especially, out of 24 hours, I think 4 to 6 hours will be devoted to news, and remaining 20 hours will be devoted to, again, this particular genre of television programming. So our major concern today is that when youngsters come and join, they don't come and join to do Bhoot Bhootni and Nag Nagin and Samp Sapera, etc. They have a different idea of the media. They want to do something different. But once they join a particular channel, the considerations are such, and there is so much of paucity of ideas, that the people who are running the channels, they cannot think beyond these things. So either you fall back upon Hindi cinema, or you fall back upon sports, too much of sports, and that too cricket, not sports really. Cricket, Bollywood, cricket, and this Nag Nagin Bhoot Bhootni business. All right. So this is one concern we are facing. So our contention is that the licenses given to these channels were for news channels and not for low-cost entertainment reality channels. If people are watching you, so be it. If you're selling well, so be it. You go on doing this, let your licenses be redefined. And privileges which are accorded to news magazines, newspapers, news gathering media, they should not be given to you. Because it's people like us who suffer. We are not going to show Bhoot Bhootni, Nag Nagin, Swarg Ki Seedhiyan, etc., etc. We will never do that, and we have never done that. But because in the garb of news, you are dishing out this, and you're catering to the baser instincts, baser appetites of the people obviously listen to you, and our TRPs go down. And we are not depending upon the Planning Commission of India, where uska nal khula hua aur paisa aa raha hai like Doordarshan. We are in the market. There has been a major paradigm shift in the last 15-20 years. Earlier, munafa khor, profiteer used to be a gali. Today it's a value. And we earn our money from the market, and we're proud of it. We don't depend upon grants. We don't depend upon any subsidy from the government. And we are very happy about it. There was a time when there was only Doordarshan. And I remember there used to be this moralistic officer, junior officer, who used to vet our tapes, who used to see our tapes as to what is going on air. And he had taken it upon itself, the moral authority, to tell us as to what should be going on air. As if being appointed by the government also gives you a moral one-upmanship. So many a time, we had to skirt the issue, we had to fight, we had to argue, to let something go on air, which we felt as professionals ought to go on air. Like for instance, I'll give you a few examples. I was the first one who went to Sri Lanka to the LTTE training camps. And I was the first one who did the first interview with Vellupalli Pirabhakaran, the LTTE chief. Doordarshan will not let it go on air. I remember my colleague M.J. Akbar, who was a very eminent journalist, you must have heard of him. He and I, we reached late N.T. Ramarao's residence at 2 a.m. because we knew he wakes up at 2 a.m. and does yoga. So we wanted to shoot that. He agreed. We shot that. And after he opened his eyes, after doing yoga, there was this full-fledged interview with him, then breakfast with him, and conversation going on. Doordarshan will not allow it. Why? Because he belonged to an opposition party. So we have seen those times also, and today we are seeing times when there is no pressure on us, and this particular liberty which we have got, it also means responsibility. That's why most people dread it. And many people have not used it properly. Hence, we have a scenario today where in the name of Hindi news, I have told you what all is going on. Today, our concern is, should we be activists? Should we be causers? Or should we be pure media people? My personal experience tells me that anyone who has been an activist in the media and a causer in the media has done more harm to the media than good. As a professional media person, I would rather be a professional media person than espouse somebody's cause. This is what my personal view is. I often give the example of Harsha Bhogle. How many of you know Harsha Bhogle? That's it. Poor Harsha. Huh? Harsha Bhogle, as many of us know, is a very fine cricket commentator and analyst who understands the game of cricket very well. Now, just because he understands the game very well and comments very well and analyzes it very well, if he decides that I will become a player also, I will play also, he'll be a disaster. So we as media people, we are not players. We have to maintain a certain distance from politicians, certain distance from activists, certain distance from causers, and as Dilip used the word skepticism, we have to be skeptical. We have to critically appraise, we have to critically find out as to how true are they before we decide to make our comment. Now, this vicarious sense of power is the undoing of many a journalist. मंत्री ने कंधे पे हाथ रख दिया और विनोद सुनाओ क्या हाल है, और विनोद दुआ अगर बेवकूफ है तो खुश हो गए. तो इस सब की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. आप अभी जाएंगे जब प्रोफेशन में जाएं, आप हिंदी समझते हैं तमाम लोग? आप लोग अभी जब प्रोफेशन में जाएंगे आप देखेंगे कि जो भी पावर में होता है, सत्ता में होता है, उसकी आंखें बंद होना शुरू हो जाती हैं. और जब आंखें बंद होना शुरू होती हैं, चालाकी बढ़ती जाती है. वो चाहेगा आपको पेट्रोनाइज करना, आपके कंधे पर हाथ रखना. और बहुत लोग ऐसे हैं मीडिया में जो हाथ रखवा लेते हैं कंधे पर, who pawn their own freedom for a contract of tissue papers to be supplied on aircrafts. श्री विद्यानिवास मिश्र हुआ करते थे, संपादक थे नवभारत टाइम्स के, बहुत विद्वान थे. उनका कहना था कि हमने प्लास्टिक की कंघी के लिए चांद को देखना छोड़ दिया है. कितने लोग चांद को देखते हैं? जबकि चांद हमारे बचपन से कहानियों का हिस्सा, मामा बना दिया, चंदा मामा भी. बट एक प्लास्टिक की कंघी के लिए चांद को देखना छोड़ दिया. बिल्कुल इसी तरह से जो आजादी आपके पास होगी, जो ताकत आपके पास होगी, जब आप प्रोफेशन में आएंगे, बहुत प्रलोभन भी आएंगे आपके सामने. तो अगर आप इन प्रलोभनों से बचकर अपना काम करते रह पाएं, तो आप यकीनन देखेंगे कि आप खुद कितना अच्छा महसूस करते हैं और लोग आपको किस निगाह से देखते हैं. पहली बात. दूसरी बात, इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि आप नैतिक रूप से औरों पर हावी हो जाएं. अगर आपकी प्रोफेशनल प्रैक्टिस साफ सुथरी है तो ये आपकी निजी उपलब्धि है, कोई आप एहसान नहीं कर रहे हैं किसी पर, बाय बीइंग क्लीन इन योर प्रोफेशन. तो लेने का मैं आपसे यही कहूंगा कि इस वक्त हम जिस हालत में हैं मीडिया की, हमारे 4 अंग्रेजी न्यूज चैनल हैं, 24/7, टाइम्स नाउ, हेडलाइंस टुडे, CNN IBN, 5 और न्यूज एक्स. इसमें से अगर हम न्यूज एक्स को अलग कर दें तो 24/7 एंड CNN IBN एक से हैं, क्योंकि ट्रेनिंग एक सी रही. हेडलाइंस टुडे की विधा जो है यौन. टाइम्स नाउ वो एक एक्टिविस्ट चैनल है अर्नब का, अर्नब गोस्वामी, एंड ही इज रनिंग इट वर्चुअली सिंगल हैंडेडली. हिंदी चैनल्स की तरफ अगर आप आए तो हम राहुल द्रविड़ की तरह हैं, NDTV इंडिया, ठुक 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 लगे हुए हैं. बाकी इंडिया टीवी ने एक बेंचमार्क बना दिया है आज तक के लिए और चैनल्स के लिए, वही इच्छाधारी नागिन वाला, सांप सपेरा, एलियंस आए थे, एक ये भी था सीरीज, 4 घंटे चला था